Okay, you can go.
So I'm going to talk about standards and trends and some of the numbers and such that were reported while there, and then we'll have Bob get into the meat. And as he has already said, Rick can jump in if I don't give enough detail on any of the standards stuff. Okay, so 5 days, 55,000 or more attendees. I haven't seen the final count. 1,700 exhibitors and 300 speakers, and that's what they have on their website right now for the plug for next year, so you can start saving. So this is what I'm going to cover, and then he can cover all the meaty stuff. So the day before NAB and the day before IBC each year is a meeting called the Devoncroft Executive Summit. And I've started going to it every time because it really digs into the business of media technology and how we're going to make money at this and what vendors should know going into it. So I'm just going to share a few slides on that, and then I'll go into the IP showcase and the tested product category where you have to actually prove you have something that ships. The demos, the presentations, what's coming up with the future zone demos and what's expected before NAB, and then a couple of things about some joint demos and announcements that were relevant at the show. So this is the Devoncroft group. I don't know, have any of you gone to their summits before? Yeah, they're really excellent. So it's really hard to see on this, but for the first time, the top trend in the big broadcast survey, the trend index showed IP networking as the #1. It was further down last year, but when they started looking at who's actually spending money on what, this came out on top. So there was a lot of good news and bad news this time around, and this is the top and the lowest end of the purchasing growth. So the three things that were growing the fastest were, you can see them there, I can barely read them. Oh yeah, blade servers, digital video recorders, and compute and storage. No surprise, the things that had lost the most were analog TV transmitters, master control switchers, and ENG cameras were down at the bottom of the loss category. So the obstacles that they came up with that they said were the most challenging are listed there, bandwidth, cost, and so forth. But what they wanted to focus on as part of this session was that the vendors were not ready and that the applications were not ready. That was an argument that because there's been a dip for a lot of vendors in revenue, and because of the reluctance to jump in, both for fear of flying and because the perception is that the vendors don't have the product lines ready yet, or the applications. But what they pointed out was while economically the sales of product and such have been down, services are starting to climb. So the good news is that there's an expectation that as we go forward, services, which also include being able to order up something on the cloud, off the cloud, like the Media Live service that Elemental Live AWS offers, those kinds of things are growing. Yes?
What does CHER stand for?
CAGR. CAGR?
Yeah.
It's, oh gosh, now you're going to stump me. Who's in a...
Annual growth rate.
That's annual. I knew it had to do with growth rate, but I couldn't remember what the C was. Okay, annual growth rate.
It looks like services was it 5% or above, and now it's 1/3 of a percent.
0.37. But look how far down product and total market are for that period of time after the growth leading up to 2012. Okay. But there's good news. So ATP, who are the tennis professional organization, took some of this data and looked at how they look at the world. And their belief was that there are established vendors in a lot of these top categories and none in the bottom two. And so they were asking that people in this industry really start to pay attention to that bottom area. And then in the application side, the application layer. He said all of the vendors in this area need to be paying attention because they're going to be challenged by new ways of producing and moving content around. And this was heavily cloud focused, so you can see what the angle was for that. So this was a slide that was shared that I thought was compelling, and I'm sorry that it's a little bit of an eye chart. But the thing that caught my eye was looking at the average length of time that products live in the marketplace and when the different rights acquisition for upcoming NFL are. As you start to look at the timeline and the equipment life, it's what do vendors bet on if they're in this sports side of the industry, and what should they be building and when that will survive over that span of time before the next rights window opens up in 2031. And I'm sure people want to spend a lot of money. You can get the entire Devon Cross Summit study, but you have to be a member to get it. So I can give you a slide if you want to look at more detail on this when it's not up on a big screen. So I thought you would appreciate this quote, since it's a Turnerite. I guess I can still call it a Turnerite. He was saying that the difference in the way we're going to make money, this was a quote that was shared in another person's slide, was that now at an atomic level you can see and get paid for the content that's being pulled and used, whereas before it was more difficult to track and know. So that's the argument for putting things into a cloud where you can start to pull out the data directly as to who's using what and how much of it. So interesting concept. So I'm just hitting some highlights. Now I'm going to jump straight over to the IP showcase and the theater. So it was heavily attended. It's the third year we've had the IP showcase and theater, IP theater at IBC. And the first year, it was really a lot of what I would call prototype, early alpha, no finished products at that point. Last year, you were supposed to have a product that could be shipped within 90 days. And then starting with NAB this year, you had to go to a pre-NAB test to prove that you actually complied, and then you could be part of a catalog that listed what your products were capable of doing. And the idea was it's a snapshot in time where you have the name of the vendor, the product, the software version, and a link to the product catalog. And then from that, you should be able to put together a solution that would work together. And that was the concept. So that was predominantly 2110 testing in March. Now in August, we went back to Wuppertal, Germany at Riedel's facility, which we did last year as well before IBC. But this year, again, it was for a catalog test, and they extended the type of testing to look further into the NMOS, ISO 4, ISO 5 testing, which we can talk about a little more in a moment, and also what they're calling TR 1001-1. So we'll come into a little more of that in a moment. So this is the pyramid that EBU came up with, and there's a little handout, and if any of you want to go on the EBU website, you can pick up this detail. And this replaces the JT&M roadmap slide that has been floating around for a few years and being updated. And the point that the folks at EBU, and I think some of the guys at BBC really helped drive this design, is that the 2110 standards for moving video essences, audio essences, and data essences all separately in the network is one thing, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, and that's the green portion. And underneath it, we start to see the other pieces of the pie, like time and synchronization, discovery and connection, which is where this NMOS, ISO 4, and ISO 5 come in. The ISO 4 is registration discovery. So I'm a camera, I'm a microphone, and you should handle me in this way. On the network, which is where we get into the red area, which is the configuration and monitoring. And finally, at the bottom and at this pyramid, and And obviously, the larger piece at the bottom, or as the EBU guys were saying, the green's the tip of the iceberg. This is the underwater big portion. It's security. And we just touched on that. We're just making headway into the security side now. And one of the things this handout does do for you, if you want your acronym chart, is it will tell you what AMWA BCP 003, which is secure HTTP APIs for making sure your solution works and so on and so forth. There's a list of quite a lot of detail. So I would suggest either you can take a picture of one of these flyers to take home with you, or look it up on the EBU site. And then there's always Rick, who knows all of this in his sleep. AIMS, which is the kind of marketing arm that gets together once every other week, I think, with a technical group and a marketing group. And the good thing that AIMS does is we actually have a call on Fridays with the technical group that it's the only time when you get Video Services Forum, SMPTE, the JTNM group, the Joint Task Force for Networked Media, the AIMS Alliance, which is the marketing arm, and the AMWA group, who are handling the NMOS for the controller registrations, all on the same call, and we walk through where we are in status with each one of the activities that these groups are having together. Oh yeah, AES as well, and IETF as well. And so we go through these things all together and decide which areas need more effort in order to make the other areas work more smoothly. To me, this is a huge breakthrough, because not having collaboration among these groups means that stuff gets developed in silos. And I would say that the interoperability testing we've been doing over the last, 4 years or more, has really proven hugely beneficial, because a lot of vendors who are frenemies now know what works with what, and people that complement each other in the production suite or in the transport suite now know who they can call on. And we've all kind of gotten to be friends over spending weeks on end, many, many hours every day together, getting to these points. So this is another roadmap that's available through the AIMS website if you go through AIMS. And these are the results. There's a little card here, you can take the picture as well to get the free test results. They didn't print them out because each one's about 30 pages. And I'll show you an example of what one page of the test report looks like, which is the annex at the end of the test documentation. They were extremely thorough in how they put together the criteria under which all these products would be tested. And they were absolutely certain that people understood what was expected of them. And it was a little bit chaotic back in March, because people would walk in, an engineer would walk in with a device and hadn't read the test plan, didn't even know while they were there the company had sent them to bring this product to be tested. So this time for August, you had to send in PCAPs ahead of time. You had to send in streams and prove to the group, the test group, that you were compliant, or at least that you knew what you were doing before you got there with the equipment.
So I noticed those green and red stickers on the show floor at certain booths.
So if you passed the criteria for either the SMPTE 2110, which also included 2022-7 for protected switching across the network, if you passed that, the 2110 portion, you got a green sticker. You could only put it next to the product that was tested. You couldn't like stick it on every encoder or router or switch you owned. It could only be on the product line that went through the testing. And the red sticker was for products that had gone through this AMWA, NMOS, JTNM, TR 1001-1 testing, which in normal parlance is kind of an end-to-end proof that you can do something that you would want to be able to do if you were going to actually put a solution on the air. So you'll never be able to read this, but I would encourage you to download the reports, because like here's an example of just the main first page of the 2110 testing, 2110-10, 20, 30, 40, and then various other bits of just general test. And if you had a white area, that meant either your product didn't do that, or it wasn't supposed to do that, it wasn't applicable. And gray either meant it didn't function at that moment, or it didn't work for some reason. And we all were encouraged to share this information, whether or not we had gray spots, because then the customer can still come to you and say, have you fixed that problem yet? So everyone agreed to it. They signed the MOU that said, and everybody had an option to opt out before they printed these documents in case they didn't want somebody to see holes. So obviously, if you're an audio-only product, you're not going to be doing 2110-20. So you would have white gaps there. So that's 2110. And then the TR 1001 testing, again, same format. It's fascinating to read the detail at which areas were tested. And again, you'd only really see that if you downloaded it and started taking a look at the annex. Those are just examples. And there were at least 3 or 4 pages per test, because there were, I want to say, started out with 71 products, dropped to 64, I think, from more than 30 companies. So we've come a long way. So just the last comment on this was just that we will likely do this again right before NAB, but it'll be something new again. We have decided that we are not going to repeat anything that's already been tested, except hopefully do updates online remotely, so that you don't have to drag all your equipment and costs to the site. But we will continue testing new things that haven't been proven out before, or things that have been amended or changed through standards updates. We're in the middle of doing the annual review now on 2110-10, 20, 30, what else? 21, 40, 41,
and the new, well, and then
23.
23 and the brand new one, 24.
And 24, yeah. And if you want any details about what any of those mean, because those aren't in your normal vocabulary, Rick's sitting right there, and he chairs that group on the phone every week, and he's very good at dealing with outspoken individuals. So this presentation caught my eye. It's actually a very aggressive rollout that Discovery Networks is doing. This is the Eurosport side of it. And they, Gordon Castle, you may remember from Turner Days, he was the presenter on this. And their goal is, by the time the Tokyo Olympics rolls around, to have this network solution working. So the idea being, you have multiple locations throughout Europe. You have your remote production pieces, parts, and you can pretty much go anywhere do live remote production with the solution, and it's heavily cloud dependent. So I found this just to be graphically a really good way to show how they were going to build from the initial view of their architecture to this fully connected and remote and automated. And the crunch on this one, I know because we live this daily, is that some of this kit has to ship in time, like March at the latest, for the upcoming Olympics in Japan, and has to be all interconnected to the European solution by then. So a lot is riding on this technology. So, and there's our buddy Matthew Goldman, and 4 gentlemen that I won't dive into each one, but these are actual deployments, and the folks presenting from BBC, CBC, elsewhere, were very frank about where the holes still lie. And there's a woman who's in charge of news for the BBC, who I failed to get a picture of, and she basically said, you guys need to understand that if we jump into this pond, our jobs are all on the line. That was the same thing that Gordon said on the Eurovision presentation was, there's still a lot of work to be done, as this pyramid indicates. And we are trusting you. 2 years ago, we didn't. A year ago, we didn't. And at the Devoncroft Summit, it was pointed out again that they're relying on us in the industry, both from a technology and standard standpoint and product delivery standpoint, to actually have thought through the nuances of what real world live television is all about, because this is, SMPTE 2110 is largely uncompressed and it's largely used for live. So, it is, except for the production side, maybe you might get a little grace, but still people have jobs to do and it's extremely expensive when you're in the production phase. So, it was a challenge. Every single person who presented on something that's been deployed pointed out the holes. So we're moving as fast as we can to try to plug those holes as a standards group and as a industry, like the video services side and so forth. And but we all are in that situation of no one's paying us to build it and they will come anymore as vendors. You really have to have a commitment from the end user at the same time you're trying to develop and do your R&D. And part of the Devoncroft Summit was looking at the percentages of budgets being spent on R&D versus marketing, sales, and so forth. And it was really showing a big strain there on the R&D side for the revenues to make the shareholders happy while you're still developing ahead far enough to make people like this happy with their live deployment. So that was kind of long and drawn out, but there are some statistics if it's helpful to anyone in the room on that. So I'm going to brag for a moment. So Nevion has the first JPEG XS over 2110 live deployment out there running now. And we had to work really closely with N2Pix on this because technically it was, TICO, which was adopted first in like Japan and Europe. And we've been waiting for this JPEG XS capability, and we needed to prove it out over 2110. And so that's been done, and it's out there running. So this is Andy Rayner from our group explaining how the deployment's working right now. And so basically what's happening is within the studio, everything stays compressed. Then when you start to move it between and among facilities, it's going to JPEG XS compression, and then it's still being, the latency's low enough and the bandwidth's still high enough for them to live switch and do production as they wish. And the other thing we saw while we were there is more and more companies are collaborating. Besides the consolidation of companies, more and more companies are collaborating, and I give credit to the interoperability testing and others for putting these groups together, because we all know who works best with Arista or a Cisco or Mellanox for switches. We all know, how we're going to prefer to transfer, if we're going to use IGMP, if we're going to use network address translation, if we're going to use NetConf, we know who handles each one of those things best. We know, who has the different edge gateways that can serve the problem, serve the need of the individual. And so I was just really encouraged, not only with the active and working deployments, but with the collaboration that's going on there. And so this is my little other selfish plug, because we in Sony are doing some end-to-end solutions. Our focus is heavily on orchestration, because again, if we can't glue all this stuff together and make it work live, we're in trouble. But it wasn't all work. There were really long days, and Bob, I'm sure, had very sore feet, but there were people, I think Diversified hosted a happy hour out on this, what they call the beach, that also has a deck, and the boats come up and pick you up and take you out for your dinner, and it's really quite lovely once you get outside the 15 halls. How many people here have been to an IBC before? Okay, great. So it's grown from 15 halls to now even more outside exhibits and tents and such. So it's massive. And that's it. That's mine. Any questions for Rick on specific standards or what any of the acronyms mean? Ooh, that's my picture from last year. I took that on the way to dinner one night. It's a lovely place to have dinner as well. Okay, it's all yours, Bob.
Yeah, anybody need a bio break before Bob starts?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I feel like I was ignoring the audience by looking at that screen to try to see which thing was next.
Okay. We only lost one person. That's pretty good.
Oh, he's just getting started.
Okay, so thank you, Luann. That was such a great summary of everything going on, and so I'm going to just dive right into some of the products and things. Like she said, 15 halls. IBC is a really, by the way, I got an incredible deal. I got lucky and all the flights were normally $1,200, $1,300. And I woke up one Saturday morning, logged into Delta, and I found a flight for like $678. So, which I paid that going to California, to San Francisco before. So anyway, you can shop around and try to find deals, but it's such an incredible show. Rick you're probably the reason why I first went. But it's so much more relaxed. It's so much more, the vendors, you can spend so much more time with the vendors. One of my examples is, NAB, you go in the hall, as Rick has said, and it's like, when I was with Turner, it was like, Turner, it's like, they would part the waters, excuse me, let Bob and Rick through, and then they do the whole presentation. You felt really special and you got a free gift. And after about 30 minutes or an hour, it was like, okay, Bob, NBC's here, goodbye, and the next network comes in, and IBC is so much different. And it's funny, a lot of the booths you get there, and the first thing you want to know is what alcoholic drink you want, because there's beer everywhere. But anyways, so it was really great. I swear you could spend the first year just trying to figure out all the halls and where everything is. And by the way, you can get lost. I mean, it's literally a maze because there's so many halls and they're all interconnected, and some of them are tents. They're literally tents with portable air conditioners and everything. So it's crazy. But anyway, so TAG, one thing I want to mention here is that this company, I mentioned this, and I'll try not to repeat myself from some stuff from NAB presentation if you saw it, but this company started, as Rick probably remembers, one 55-inch monitor at NAB, right, and showing off multi-viewing back then. And now they've got this big booth, big, huge wall, and they're just really doing well in the industry for IP multi-viewing and now 2110. And then the big thing in NAB they showed was the -7, was the hitless switching and all that. Anyway, so the one thing that you need to know about TAG is understand is that if you buy their system and say, you buy basically software licenses per PIP, but if you said, I want 32 HD licenses, you pay that and they give you a thumb drive. That's it. So the idea is that you go buy the server, right, and then you plug the thumb drive in and you load it up and boot it and everything, and then you have to have the appropriate network card, right, and you're in business, you're running. So it's a different concept than some of the other. They will sell you a server, by the way, if you insist on it, but their whole thing is software. So anyways, on standard off the shelf servers and everything. So they're doing really well. A lot of great products. Sencor, I actually got to spend a day at Sencor. Finally got to go out and visit them in the middle of nowhere in Sioux Falls. Anyway, so got to spend a whole day looking at their technology and what they're doing. So they're, as you know, they got into the open gear and they started making cards. Turner owns hundreds of these open gear cards for decoding. And they started out as 420, now they're doing 422, and now of course they're doing IP, and now they're starting, we've been pushing them, Turner was pushing them really hard for SMPTE 2110. So basically if you had a decoder, right, we want 2110 out, right? And they're now starting to do that they actually have gateway cards, and they actually have some new decoders that are actually doing 2110, and they're working really hard on the open gear cards. So anyway, and they also have, their pizza boxes and everything else. The other big thing is, which is really interesting, is that they're doing the delay servers. So you know how Turner delays 7 days up at HBO, and so now they have a little box, and then they have a server box that can do that, and it's a lot cheaper than some of the other companies that are doing that, but it's really simple. You know, it's kind of like Pixelmetrics used to be with their DV store. It was a very simple record and playback server. And then also they're even doing some stuff with down at the bottom there with IPTV, and some of they're working with Royal Caribbean and the cruise lines and things like that, doing IPTV with that. So anyway, so they're making some cool stuff, and they've gone to some third of the rack, I don't think you can shut the laser in here, King, but third of the rack stuff across there, where you get small boxes. Some of them are doing SDI to 2110, but vice versa and everything else. MediaLinks has moved to their new 100 gig solutions, and so this was one of the new boxes, and they've been a big partner at Turner here with networking for DWDM over fiber. Their big competitor, as you know, is NetInsight, so that's and then you have Ciena. But it's really MediaLinks from Japan and NetInsight from Europe. And so this is a new thing, and their new thing now that they were doing was the JPEG XS that Luann was talking about earlier. So it started out with Tico, and now everyone's going to JPEG XS because all the advantages of that. I still think Tico has a place if you want to do 3G over, if you want to do 4K over 3G, right? So like where CNN wanted to get a 4K camera from the front of the Capitol back to the Bureau, you know, they could book a 3 gig 1080p circuit with Verizon, and so they got a MediaLinks box. Next thing you know, because of Tico, they were doing 4K from the Capitol, and then you can do the zoom and cut and things like that, right? Area of interest and everything, so really cool stuff. This was one of my favorite finds from the show. I was texting this to so many people. I thought it was just amazing. This company I never heard of before. I walked by the booth, and by the way, some of these companies, you know, these halls, as you know, people that have been there, Luann, you know, like there's different halls that are like more, you know, more cameras and more transport and more encoding, and then there's halls that are more like AJA and Blackmagic and Decimator, all those, and then there's halls that's more audio, you know, right, things like that, and then there's a hall that's just rigging and lighting and things like that. But what's funny is, so you can't just not go to that hall if you don't care about lighting, you know, because you might find something else. And this is one of those cases where this company was off to the side of a hall that had nothing to do with these products. It was funny. But anyway, so basically this is an SDI to HDMI converter, and they make an HDMI to SDI converter with a scaler built in it, like Decimator does, and some, you know, Blackmagic, some of the other companies do. But what's really amazing is that not only do you get a monitor on their converter, but you also get an eye pattern, an actual eye pattern. So anyway, so now this is not going to measure jitter and everything, so Tektronix, don't get worried. But anyways, but basically, guess how much this box cost? You're absolutely not going to believe it. Yeah, you can't answer. It's $200. So yeah, so which is absolutely incredible. And you know, a lot of the test equipment out there, if you just want to see anything of an eye pattern, it's $6,000 more to see it. So anyway, so by the way, I had an interesting talk with Gene Zimmerman from Cobalt, and I'm sure John, you know this, but basically what he explained to me, the way they're doing this is that the SDI chips that are receiving the signal, now the new chips, I forget which companies they're buying from, but basically they actually having a RF type of an eye pattern monitoring device in it. And so that's how they're tapping into this measurement and just displaying it. So, and I also found out, by the way, that there's a company that makes chips for TVs for on OSD, and basically they're just a dirt cheap company that makes chips that does the on-screen stuff, and basically they're going to them in China and saying, you know, we want a chip that'll display this, you know, right? And he was saying that so they get them really cheap. But they said, you know, what happens is, as you know, how TVs turn over all the time, you know, you constantly see the new TV models and everything. He said that they'll get that for a year or two and then it's gone, you know, right? They can't get the chip anymore. So anyways, but I just think it's absolutely amazing. I think if you were doing an install and you're taking hits, you know what I mean, right? And you're wondering what's wrong, and you plug this in and saw a collapsed eye, you know, you saw no eye pattern or just noise, you know, you would know there's a problem. So anyway, so I thought it was really cool. So I've already ordered one. Yes, sir.
Why is it displaying on one side 1080i 51, the other side 1080i 5990?
It's a scaler. So yeah, that's funny that I didn't notice that. But anyways, but yeah, if you're doing, normally you would not do that with SDI to HDMI. You just go pass through. But if you're doing HDMI to SDI, you know, as you know, most computers, when you plug in HDMI, it's 60, not 5994. So that's why they have the scaler converted to 5994. So anyways, I thought this was cool. I've already ordered one, and it's on the way. So anyways, so they also made little baby switchers and all kind of things. Like I said, Lumitech, like I said, it was interesting walking around just seeing all the products they had in the booth. The next thing I talked about this for NAB, if you guys remember, but this was the other cool find. This is a little 2.8-inch broadcast monitor with SDI in. And what I love is it's a full-size BNC, not stupid DIN or HD BNC, anyways, which is fine. But anyways, we're still everything we're doing is BNC. And anyways, and so this is pretty cool with audio meters and everything. It has a battery built in it. It runs for 2 hours on the battery. It has USB. I was actually charging this one while we were eating. So, and same USB. By the way, if you grab this out of your bag and it was dead, you could just plug your battery that I just loaned to the guy back here. Where'd he go? Oh, he left. I loaned my battery to him. Oh, there he is. But we all carry the battery, right? Because our phone could die during the day, right? And so you could actually run this battery, monitor off that. I'm going to pass it around. This is $300 for an SDI monitor. So anyway, I thought it was really cool. So, B&H and Marketech is selling it, by the way. Marketech has a shorter lead time than B&H does. Hey, you're back. So anyways, I thought you took my battery and ran. The next one was Pantech. Pantech is an interesting company. You always hear me say that about their products. One thing I want to mention to you is their big thing was they have cheaper multi-viewers than other companies, but they've added 4K. So now they support HDMI 2.0, right? 4K. Rick and I, you remember asking Evertz how many years ago it was for 4K, and Evertz is finally doing it. And so now Pantech's doing it because, as you know, I was at Costco looking at TVs, by the way, a couple days ago, and everything 40 inches and up is 4K. So anyway, so basically, so now, why not take advantage of those pixels and see the higher quality? So anyways, reason why I threw this card in here is I want to mention I just got this card as a demo unit, and what I want to tell you is, and I can talk about this now without getting in trouble with Turner when we get into HDCP. But anyways, but I've been testing this at Clark, my new company, and basically, if you all ever try to take a consumer device, convert to SDI, which Rick did many years ago, and this thing HDCP, right, has to have a handshake, right, with the monitor, it has to have a license key, blah, 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 and everything. It's a problem. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but every satellite truck and TV truck that has DirecTV receivers on them and dishes, about a year or so ago, maybe it was 2 years ago, DirecTV started doing HDCP on every single channel. It was a bad night.
It was 4 years ago on July.
You remember the exact date? Oh my gosh. See? Told you.
I was out doing Conan.
It was bad.
One day they were able to pull in highlights, and the next day they weren't. And coincidentally, it was just before the deal closed where AT&T bought DirecTV.
So anyways, so basically, if you take Comcast or anything, Apple TV, by the way, Apple TV is notorious. Anything but the menu on Apple TV has HDCP on it. So you have to get a handshake. So that means you cannot take a Blackmagic or Decimator or any of those converters, convert to SDI to put it on your router. You can't do it, it won't work. So anyway, so a certain person I know found a splitter online that Amazon sells for $16, and I've been using them for years. I know people have been using them, and by the way, they will eventually get shut off because the list is always updated. But anyway, so I have 3 right now, and one of them doesn't work. But anyways, basically, people have been putting a splitter in front of it. It's called a gaming splitter, and it basically says I'm a Samsung TV. So this is completely not legal, but anyways, but it works. Anyway, so what I want to get to is the legal part of this, and that is that Ensemble Designs came out with a waiver, and you could sign a waiver, and you could buy their Bright Eye adapter converter, and you would sign a waiver basically saying, I'm not going to make copies of movies, right, everything, and send it to them and do it. So I know people that bought those converters, and it worked, right, everything, because it had an official license inside everything. Well, Ensemble's not doing real well. That's all I'm going to say. They weren't at the show, and they're trying to get things together. So anyway, so basically, I don't see anything happening there if you're trying to do that right now at all. So I found out Pantech is doing the same thing where they have the license key on their card, and I was skeptical about it. So I called up Thomas Tang, the president. I talked to him. He absolutely paid for it. It's all legit and everything. I got the card in, I plugged it into Apple TV, and I moved the little jumper that they tell you to move inside the card, everything, and it fully works. So anyway, so I ran it for days and it works. So if anybody's looking to do this, I recommend this card. It works really well. And by the way, these cards, DirecTV has bought hundreds of them. Google uses them, Amazon uses them. Every company you can imagine uses them, and one of the companies, Cisco's, bought over 1,000 of these cards, by the way, because of HDCP. So it's pretty cool and it works. And they also have a Genlock version, by the way, if you want to Genlock it. Okay, I got to go faster because I spent too much time on that. Harmonic was showing all their encoding, and then of course, and everything used to be, you know, HD and 4K, and now they were actually showing some 8K HEVC encoding. It's 65 megabits. So if you do the math, that's pretty amazing. You know, we went from, you know, 12 gigs at 4K to say, you know, maybe 18 or 20 megabits or something like that, or even a little bit lower. And now, you know, now 8K at 48 gigs, they're running at 465. So that was pretty cool to just to see that. And, you know, because you remember I told you at NAB, you know, Blackmagic had a kind of a dumb HD 8K switcher with BNC connectors. And now you're starting to see more 8K stuff where you saw very little at NAB. Anyways, Ross had a lot of new products. The Ultrix is their new, sorry, the thing jumped on me. The Ultrix router is their new fancy router that's kind of like the Riedel router, where it's all FPGA driven and you can do anything to anything, including map any audio to any audio. So it's really, really powerful. And now because they bought the company that makes all these IP products, now they're adding 2110, and so they now have a 2110 card for this product, and you can do 2110 now with it. And they also added these new, that's one of the converters, the Iggy, they have the Newt and all these crazy lizard names. But you can do Maddie, you can do Dante, you can do all these different audio formats and everything from 2110 back and forth. Very, very powerful. And then they have this panel. I'm going to skip that one and go back. But they introduced a new touchscreen panel, by the way, at NAB, like Evertz has, where it was 2RU. Now they have a 4RU version of it. So look at that huge take button. And anyway, so it's pretty cool stuff. And then if you want to redo your layouts, you can see like you can have presets for multi-viewers, right? Because the Ultrix router does multi-viewers built in it. And so anyway, and they're really powerful. And so you just touch the screen, boom, you know, all your screens change in your room and everything. So it's really, really powerful. And then this was part of the 2110 and how they're doing their registration discovery and all that stuff. And they are working with NMOS and all the stuff Luann talked about. This was my next favorite thing I found. I thought was interesting is I've always thought it would be cool if I could look at SDI video on my iPhone, and especially with my case. So anyway, so basically, so this takes basically SDI in, and it's wireless, and I got another picture. You can see the wireless antennas there. It's Wi-Fi, but you can plug USB 3 into it, USB-C, sorry, and into Lightning, and you can look at SDI video on your iPad or iPhone, which I thought was really neat. This one's about 900 euros. Anyways, and those are Sony batteries, by the way, that can go in there, or you can power it with USB. So if you want it absolutely remote, you can put the Sony batteries on it, but it's also Wi-Fi, so you can actually look at it wireless. So anyway, as long as you're on the same Wi-Fi network. So anyway, so I thought this was a really neat product. They make a rasterizer monitoring software system like you would use when you're monitoring, when you're shooting movies, for like you're looking at the video and the quality of the video and everything. And so they're already doing waveform and vector. And so they're planning on adding that to this, by the way. So you literally could see a video. So today it's video and audio, and it records, by the way. So this is, I thought it was really powerful, kind of a neat product. And there it is on the iPhone. So there we're looking at SDI video off his little orange box there. I thought that was neat. This was the Ikegami booth, so they were showing all their cameras. They had an 8K camera before. Let me jump forward. What was? Oh, why did I mess up forward? There's the camera. So go forward. HDR monitors and all that. And then I moved to, this is actually Fujinine, so I'll go to Canon in a second. So Fujinine had their cameras. This was an interesting test chart they had there. By the way, they had a setup where they had, Canon had a setup where they had a HD lens and a 4K lens, and they had a chart there, and they had a really high quality monitor, and they actually brought the focus controls off the two cameras that were shooting through the HD and the 4K lens, so you could see the difference. You know, because remember when HD came out, people used to say, you know, that SD lens looks fine, you know, I mean, it looks okay, everything. And so now it's the same thing with 4K, is people are saying, you know, do you need a new lens or not, all that stuff. So anyway, so it was really interesting looking at these charts and seeing the detail in the charts and everything. They have a, Canon had a 122 lens at NAB. Fujinine, I'm sure, had to beat them, so they got 125 multiplier. So at an 8mm wide, that gives you a 1,000 millimeters on the tight side. Same thing as Canon. and the Canon one, remember, was $225,000. They're very expensive lenses. Marshall had their new little POV cameras, and they're now have a 4K little camera, and then that's the little RCP controller where you can control the camera like in a truck. Unfortunately, they're still doing RS422, by the way, for control. I asked them, I said, you guys got to catch up and start doing IP so we can put it on a network to control the gain and the iris and everything. And then we move into the Canon, right? So we got Canon, their HDR monitors. They were making some really nice HDR monitors now. This was their, and then their, that's the 122 UHD lens that I showed you from NAB. That's really, really nice, and 8 millimeters on the wide side. This is the new controller that'll actually shift the back focus. So the idea is that if you want to create a wide shot that's slightly out of focus and put up graphics over it, you can actually do that. They're not sure how this is catching on, because the one thing you find out is if you have a really nice switcher, you can actually defocus in the switcher. So anyway, so it's like, and whenever I tell engineers this, they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. You know, like people that have set up lenses before, they're like, you're, you know, motorized the back focus and you're moving it and, you know, putting it back. You know, I don't believe it goes back to the same place every time. You know what I mean? So there's people that kind of question that. But anyways, so we'll see what happens with it. It's an interesting idea of what they're doing. And then the other big thing is actually go back to the other lens. Actually, let me go forward real quick. The other thing I want to tell you about is on their long lens is, I don't know if you guys heard this or not, but let me go back to that previous one. Sorry, right there is, if you guys heard this or not, because I don't know if I mentioned NAB. They're doing this incredible feedback loop now to the Sony cameras, and their other vendors are now wanting to join in. And what it is, you know, when you zoom a tight lens really far, you lose light, right? Well, they're giving a feedback now back to the ramp, the curve of that to the CCU, and the CCU on Sony cameras is adding gain. And I saw him do this, by the way. I was wondering how much they did. And when he zoomed all the way in on the 122 multiplier lens, it added 10 dB of gain in. So obviously you can't open the iris, right? Because then you're going to lose focus. So anyway, so it's really cool. Camera people love it, right? Because you know how they zoom in and focus and adjust, get their shots, everything. They hate that when it gets really dark. So I think it's really neat. It's definitely going to be catching on with other vendors and everything. But Canon and Sony is the ones doing it right now. And that's the defocus thing. And then you had the large format cameras. I'll try to go a little faster here. This was a high-speed camera that was this company that was there exhibiting with Canon. And so this one is a 4K up to 1,000 frames per second. Isn't that crazy? 1,000 frames per second. I thought this was interesting. This jib mounted to a BMW just by suction cups on the roof. I was wondering how I wondered how much weight that was. But anyways, it was pretty big contraption, by the way. By the way, Vinton has a new tripod. If you guys seen this, but they have a new tripod series. It's hard to explain without seeing kind of video, but basically what it is before when you turn your knob, remember it would click, right? And you know, over time they wear out and you have to retighten them again, and then the camera wants to fall and you're like, crap, I got to get the Allen wrenches out and, you know, fix this, then try to get it tighter again. Well, they have the system now where there's basically a little flapper thing that comes down right there. It's right there. And basically you just push down on all three of them and it's locked. And it's really cool. When you're ready to go, you lift up on all three of them, so there's no turning knobs, and you drop the tripod down, right? It claps down, you lay them back down, and you're locked again. So you can set up and tear down really quick with this. And one of the ideas was like the guy saying, hey, I want a camera at eye height. Say I'm like gonna shoot Rick. I could sit there and hold it and just get the camera right at eye height, and then I could go ahead and lock the levers down. So it's pretty neat design, and that's something new they've been showing. I thought this was a really neat monitor I found called Transvideo, and I wish I had a side shot of it, but it's really thin. It's really built well, really cool. By the way, you notice they're getting all the metadata from the red or whatever camera they're using, Arri camera, back with all the shutter information, everything going on there. I thought it was really neat. I looked it up on its SDIN. It does all kind of cool things. It does waveform. Look at that. That's on the little baby monitor. So anyways, it does waveform, vector, all that stuff, histogram, everything. And I looked it up on B&H. It was about I think it was about $1,200 or $1,000, something like that. So, but it had just a really nice picture. I really thought it was neat. And I think that's another. Oh, this is a wireless receiver, by the way. So that works with certain wireless systems. So you think about on a set, you know, right, where the producer or director is walking around, he wants to see what it looks like. He can actually see it on his little monitor. That's the little Marshall camera. Sorry, that one got out of order. And then Cobalt, of course, they had all their new products. One thing is, you know, they bought Immediate TV, they sell all their encoders. They're now big with Wrist with Rick. So now they're doing Wrist, supporting all these over the internet stuff. And basically they had a dual channel encoder. I know churches and people that love these, especially people love them for IPTV and stuff, because it's open gear, right? So now you can shove a bunch of IPTV encoders in one frame. Well, they now have a dual decoder. So people, it's like you have a dual encoder, but now you have a dual decoder. So that was kind of cool. And so they were showing their latest multi-viewer that's 4K. It does, I think, has 18 inputs and on and on. So I went over there, had a really good talk with Gene Zimmerman, the president thing, right? And then Ciro, who's the guy that, the PhD guy that works with Rick on Wrist, was there, and they're just doing great. Imagine showing all their IP solutions. And I'm trying to think of anything. This is the Selenium gateway, that does, you know, SDI to 2110 and vice versa, and everything else. Is very, very powerful solution. And there's actually a church in town here, a mega church, that actually has one of these, and they're actually doing 2110 right now, going on their fiber system that goes out to their 8 campuses. They're actually doing that. So it's really, really neat. Net Insight was showing their new more powerful switch going to 100 gigs, and also so supporting, you know, the new compression formats like JPEG XS and all that stuff. Atem was showing their new encoders, and their big thing was, of course, same thing as NAB. I think it was mainly just UHD and HDR. You know, they've always been a great partner of ours. I thought this was really interesting. I don't know if Luann saw this, but I was walking through the hall. This was CenturyLink, and they put this thing up and said, you know, 120 terabytes, you know, or 25 exabytes. I mean, and 74 trillion requests answered by CenturyLink and their CDN. So just, you know, it's staggering to think about how many feeds. Remember, this is level 3, right? Which goes back to Vivix and Williams. But anyways, so it just, they are a big company. They're doing a lot of feeds, and they're just huge. So you remember at NAB, it talked about Hitomi that used to replace the Vistec Valid. Well, what they showed really cool there was the new glass technology, which was the idea is you take a camera, you point it at an iPad, and then you send that back to the, like say the TOC here at Techwood, and the Hitomi Matchbox will measure the lip sync. So you put the microphone from your camera by the speaker of the iPad, and they've got this down to very, very tight tolerances. By the way, it's so tight that they decided they spent so much R&D with Apple and the iPad that they're not going to do Android. You know what I mean? Because you literally have to calculate the delay in the screen, the LCD screen. So anyway, so it's really cool. It's not finished yet. I talked to Don Cardone, who was there, one of the reps. They're still working, but they're trying to see how they're going to charge for it and that kind of stuff. But they told me the app was free. It's just a matter of how do you get the reader to read the, you know, the data and everything. So we'll see. Go ahead.
And what happens when the next version of iOS comes out and it's no longer accurate?
Right. They have to keep up with it. Exactly. Absolutely. So for L-band routing, there's one big company, ETL, and then there's Evertz who's doing it. And so I went and spent some time with the guy Ian from ETL, and they're doing really well. They have lots of matrices. They have a 16 by 16 L-band matrix that's 1 RU. They have a then they go to a 32 square and a 64 square, and this is a 128 square RF matrix in one box. Very, very powerful, really good isolation, really good specs. They make really great stuff. And they're doing these modules on the back. So basically, you know, you used to have, remember we used to have F connectors, they suck. So everyone's using B and C. So anyways, so basically what's interesting here is that you notice now there's fiber. So you could bring fiber in from your L and B right on the dish. Well, like Evertz that has converters, you know, right, to take fiber and convert back to RF. And in this case, that's actually the module that plugs in. So you can bring your fiber from your L and B. Of course, you have to power the L and B. But anyways, you bring your fiber in, go right into the matrix. So I thought that was really neat. They're doing some cool stuff. Nevion, and I talked to I was talking to Lan earlier, since she already talked about everything they're doing with Sony, and their big thing, of course, was discovery and registration. So Luann talked about that. So I'll move on from there. By the way, it looks like I had the picture backwards, but that's actually the way the sign was facing when I was talking to Chin and Luann and all the people from Nevion. This was interesting. I've never seen this company before, but basically they make these bricks. There's a brick right there. And what's interesting about this is this runs on the power that's on the Neutrik connector. My mind just went blank. Who knows? Is there any audio guys in here? But PowerCon, it's like PowerCon, whatever it is. Anyways, decon, they basically, they have this, they have this lockable power connector for speakers, right? To loop through the speakers, everything. And they use those now on the LED walls. And so basically they take that technology and put it in from converters. So the idea is that you can just mount this back on the racks, right? And you could do your SDI to HDMI conversion and that kind of thing, but it's powered by their power system, which is really neat. And then they make a frame that plugs all the cards in. And so anyways, it's pretty cool stuff, and they're doing some neat things. So I looked at them. I never heard of, I don't know if you can see the name in there somewhere, but I've got a card from them, but it was an interesting company. Okay, we'll move on. Oh, there it is right there. So anyway, AJA went to their booth. I was most excited about their H.264 recorder called the KeyPro Go. So they had lots of them there, and they're all up and running now and working. So this is really cool. If you didn't see my presentation before, you've got 4 USB slots on the front right there, and you can record 4 videos with H.264 on 4 thumb drives. On the back is an USB you can plug. You can record all 4 at once. This is a really cool product for $4,000, and because I see a real need for this in the industry. Blackmagic makes an encoder, but you have to use your computer. So there's trade-offs there. But anyways, and what's really cool is this would actually impress Rick, is that everybody that does MPEG for recording, the little cheap recorders and encoders, is all 420. All of them are. This does 422 10-bit. So anyway, so you actually could record your ISO, your cameras, which I think is cool. So you can ISO, so you don't have to go to a KeyPro or some type of a XD cam or some type of expensive Kodak to record all your cameras to ISO, right? You could do this on MPEG-4 on thumb drives, which is pretty cool. Also, by the way, I told them they need a burn-in, timecode burn-in, because as you know, as Rick knows really well, when we did award shows, you cannot walk out of the truck with a clean thumb drive of the show. They won't let you. So anyway, so that's why Proxology exists today. I met the guy that wrote the software. They do a actual burn in on the screen and a watermark. They do a watermark. So you can take the show with you on a thumb drive, but it's got a watermark in it. Same thing here. They're going to add timecode burn in, they said. So anyways, really cool, neat product. And then they had their HDR image analyzer, which I got a picture of that here. You can see all the different signals they're showing there. And this seems to be doing pretty well. And so they're to monitor HDR. And so that was kind of cool. And there's a lot to that. So I'll leave that. You can look it up. And then for if you're editor, they have the Kona IP card now, so they can take 2110 in and all that stuff with your Mac computers and everything. So that was neat. And then, by the way, I think that's a tag multiviewer there, by the way, that was in their booth on the screen there with their converters. And then also one last thing is, you remember at NAB, they now do the packet merge where they can have 2 routers coming in with 2110 and do the -7. Because companies like Turner that have big routers, they don't want 1 input, right? They want 2 inputs on their converters. So AJ is now doing that, just like Evertz does. That's a crooked picture, but anyways, I guess the way I took it. But anyways, basically, this is Data Tech, and my son started teaching at Gwinnett School, and they bought a lot of Data Tech, honestly, because it's low cost. Anyway, so I went by the booth and looked at it, and I thought this was interesting. This is an H.264 recorder that records on thumb drive, like we just talked about, but a lot cheaper and smaller. This is like $500, by the way. So that was interesting at like 3 quality levels. And then I thought this was really interesting. They have all these little cheap switchers and stuff, but what I thought was interesting, and this is a ProRes recorder, is this here. And basically what it is they're shooting with a 4K camera, and they're doing the zooming in and capturing the different HD images. So this is what the tablet looks like. And so basically you just move this box around right here, right? And so you can change the size of the box, and you can move it anywhere on the screen and get all the different shots. And then you can sit there and take them with the switcher. So anyway, really interesting. There's obviously EVS, Grass Valley, Sony's been doing this for some time. A lot more expensive, you can imagine, than this cheap company. But anyways, but it was interesting. And I actually knew somebody was looking for something like that at a church. So anyways, Decimator didn't have anything new, except they're doing 12G conversion now with HDMI. And they did tell me, finally, they told me at this show that they are starting to look at 2110. So they're hoping to have a 2110 solution by NAB in April. So that'll be cool, because that's what they need to be doing. Anyway, so and of course the quad split's to $295, which is ridiculous, and the 9-way open gear card is $1,000. So it's pretty crazy. Blackmagic. So where do we begin there? Basically, they came out with 2 new monitors. So they have a 5-inch monitor, portable monitor. It's right up there called the Video Assist, and they have a 7-inch monitor. These do 12G now, so they can take 4K directly into them, which is neat on a 1 BNC. And then I think it's BNC. The original monitor was DIN, which nobody wanted because they had to convert it. But anyway, so they have the new monitors, and then actually there's a tighter shot of it, and also they're a recorder. So you see the record, stop functions, and all that stuff. And then, and they're really cheap. I don't know, can you see prices up there? Yeah, was it 725 euros and 895 euros? Anyway, so which they're real close to 1-to-1 right now, by the way, so it's not a big difference. Anyways, and then their 8K switcher, they showed at NAB, which, you know, it's all BNC, so it's quad 4K, which is crazy, but they have it. And then that's their other small ATEM switcher. But the new thing was, this is their router with the buttons on the front, which is cool if you want to do something really small. What's really interesting is they came out with the new little switcher that's HDMI only. So if you think about it for a small kids room in a church or like a presentation room like this, it has 4 HDMI inputs and HDMI output. Wait, there's a whole lot more. You can completely control it on your computer with their interface software like you can on their big switchers. But also there's a tab on there which is audio, which means you can go in and take any audio on the HDMI signal and remix it with any audio on the HDMI. And there's 2 analog inputs on the switcher. So you can bring analog audio in. So say I want to play music back off my Mac, right, and plug it in, I can mix that in. It does keys and it does picture in picture. And so I got an example of that. There's a tight shot of it. By the way, there's no preview on this. It's cuts only. There is a way to go into a preview mode. Basically, if you, I don't know if you guys ever see anything where they do a, you know, remember the old green tally was preview and red was online? Well, basically you can do a thing where you preview it and then hit the cut button, right? Is the way it works. So anyways, it's just a low cost way of doing it. Well, what's interesting is that they also do the keys. So in this situation, if you're doing a Twitter channel, I mean, a Facebook Live channel, they actually had a loop of the thumbs up, right, running on this Mac, right, on this PC, on the second screen, running HDMI into the switcher, and it was over green screen, and they're keying that over the live video. All this being done on this little HDMI switcher. Does anybody want to guess how much it cost?
289 euros.
Oh. That was good, Rick. Anyways, so I'm gonna have to blur that next time. So it's $300 for everything I just told you. So anyway, so pretty crazy. As far as latency goes, I asked them that because it's important. If everything is just like their other cheap switchers, if everything is gen locked, which I don't know how you do that with HDMI, but anyways, if everything's locked together, then it's very low latency, a few lines. But once you start, when you feed normal signals into it from a computer, they're going to be free running, and then it's going to be 1 frame. Basically, it's about 1 frame. I think 2 frames is maximum. So anyways, but pretty crazy for the price for what it does. And then that's their 8K HyperDeck, which they showed at NAB, which is $5,000, Rick. And anyway, so and then on the right side is their tape machine controller. This is, you guys that have been in the industry a long time, I think I made a joke about this in the last presentation, but I have to show you a picture of it now. They were bragging how they had machine control and you could control anything you wanted to with this box. And if you look at the back of it, it's a bunch of RS422 DB9s that we've been doing for how long in the broadcast industry with DNF controllers? A long time. So anyway, so I think it's funny that they're talking how great it is. It's 422, so it's pretty funny. Anyways, Rody and Schwartz was there, and I spent some time with them. They actually are getting into, as you know, they make, I got a picture right there, they're making over the OTA, over-the-air transmitters. By the way, they just had a big ribbon cutting. They was talking to me about how they did it at the World Trade Center in New York, where they used all these new transmitters, 10, 20, and 30 kW, I believe is the numbers he told me. But anyways, they are now making satellite transmitters. So really interesting. So they're getting into that side. So this is, I guess, a 750 watt. Anyways, really interesting. And so there was their OTA transmitters, all solid state, of course, and then they also make multi-viewers. VTech is a company, as you know, from France that we started using their encoders here at CNN, at Turner, and they've gotten really big in the IPTV world and venue. So like they're really big at like that you take like the Giants and the, you know, your big huge stadiums, right? Like the like in San Jose. Anyways, so basically their big thing is they now can do 8 encodes on 1 card instead of 4. before with SDI, but wait, there's more. We've been asking for SMPTE 2110, and so that's their, it's not done yet, but it's supposed to be done by the end of the month, and so now they're supporting 2110. CNN New York, by the way, bought all their encoders from several hundred encoders up there for this, but they told them they had to have SMPTE 2110, and so they started out with the SDI backplane, and they're going to just swap the backplane and go to 2110, same encoder. So anyways, this is pretty cool, and of course, and now they're going to support 25 gig because everybody wants 25 gig now instead of 10 gig optics. So pretty neat. In the 4A booth, they had Fujitsu, which it had their HEVC encoders, the 950. So so that's there. It's 4 HDs or 1 4K. I'll try to go a little faster. And then 4K. Let me see. Go on here. 4A. Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped to. I'll go back to 4A. So jump to Sony. I spent a lot of time at Sony, they got a really good tour by Hugo and the CTO. And so you can see this drawing, and basically their theme was, their booth was packed, is everything's 2110. Everything is 2110. So anyway, so you can see here, and obviously with their relationship with Nevion, you can see all the Nevion in there, everything. So these are all the different places they were going and different devices they were going to. You even see tag multi-viewers in there, everything else. So lots of new products, their monitors, cameras, switchers. This was a remote type. Is that, who is that beeping? Oh, sorry. Anyways, but basically lots of like REMI situations where you're doing that. So let me talk about that real quick. So traditionally you have a camera, right? You have a CCU over SMPTE fiber right at the venue. Even if you're doing REMI, you still got to have a TV truck to do that, right? Thank you. So anyway, so basically, if you're doing REMI and you're taking that signal and sending it back to a network, their whole thing is, do you really need a CCU anymore, right? Because there's all this stuff on the CCU that you don't need anymore. So they've gone to this smaller CCU. I don't think I have a picture. I'll try to find a picture of here, but basically what it is it's a third of a rack now. So instead of going from a full rack CCU to a half a rack, now we're going to a third of a rack. And so it's very limited what it does, right? Because it's basically SMPTE fiber, and then you're outputting SMPTE 2110. And also what companies like Grass Valley is doing now is they're actually putting J2K, because you can do it on one FPGA, in the camera. So the idea is you can literally send J2K from the camera right back to the network over a network, right up back to your network facility. So where you switch and everything. So really cool stuff. And so Sony's got this new, really small CCU idea where you don't need all those extra things. You don't need 8 SDIs anymore, right? You don't need all this extra stuff that it does. And it's really interesting how they're doing it. There's a picture in there, but it's really small. But basically, so they were showing all their 2110 and networking. I thought this was really cool. Luann, I don't know if Nevion, how much Nevion had to do with this, but this was I thought this was cool how they're showing their network switches and how they're all interconnected and everything. So it's really neat. And then their switcher frames, I took a picture of that. Let's see here, let me move on a little faster. 4K, that was their standard CCU with 2110, which you see the LC connectors there with 10 gig interfaces. Oh, the other big thing so you're often with EVS, right? Recording cameras, ISOing, replays, all that stuff. Well, guess what? They're adding recording in the CCUs now. So basically you get so much storage, and it's a lot of storage. And basically you can sit there and start the game and it's recording all the time. But wait, you can then start sending those files. They're doing XD cam, but you can actually then send those files, push them to the cloud during the game. Right, so instead of recording on EVS and then doing these file transfers and everything from EVS, they can actually start doing this from the CCU, which I thought was really interesting. So that's something new they're doing. There's a picture of it right there. So XAVC, I think I said XD cam, but XAVC, and going out. Their new cameras, the 5500/3500, so they were showing that for 4K. And then this was their crystal LED screen. If anybody's seen it, it's absolutely incredible. One complaint, Rick, was that Mark Shubin made at NAB New York, by the way, when I was speaking with him, was that he noticed even on those type of screens, if you stand to the side, people are saying, when are you going to see these in movie theaters? And you can still see reflections off of them. And so there was an exit sign over there, a door with an exit sign, and you could see it reflecting off the screen. So Hugo told me they're working on more of a matte finish on their panels instead of it's got more of a shiny finish. So that was interesting. But anyways, and by the way, did you know this screen, a lot of people don't know this, did you know you can only mount it from the floor? So think about road shows and big, huge events, everything's hung. You cannot hang it. they don't let you. So this was interesting. This was AI doing a green screen. So I don't know if you remember, I had a picture of this at NAB, but basically the guy was walking around this room, and so there's no green screen. It learns everything, and then it keys you over the video. And it was really interesting is he took, I don't think I got a picture of it, but he wanted to show how the camera's stationary, right? But he wanted to show how he could move something and it'll relearn it. So he walked over and picked the yellow shirt off the wall. And when he did that, of course, the image got, the video got screwed up. And then he stopped and he held it, it relearned it and it rekeyed it again. And so it's really, really interesting how it works. And then the last thing with Sony is that now on their new cameras, you ready for this? You can open up the side and plug in a wireless transmitter. So instead of putting the BSI and the Link and all these really expensive wireless systems on the back of the camera, you can actually put the module in the camera. So I thought that was interesting. And then this was a little baby switcher they had there I thought was cute. And just a little tiny, simple little switcher with a little slider instead of a fader bar. All right, try to go a little faster. TSL was showing all their new products, and of course 2110. They are just doing great, big booth, doing really well on top of everything. I thought it was interesting. I've been picking on Wooler the last couple of years because they've been a little behind the times with audio, and they had a small booth in the back of the hall that was like 6 by 6. So, but anyways, so TSL is doing really great. This is their new audio devices. Very, very software programmable, really cool, really powerful, sound really good. So they're doing some great things. And then there's their 2RU PAM series, and then the PAM 1, all these different devices. And then, and this was the 2110 Arista Tektronix. You see the Prism there by Tektronix. So this was them all working together with PTP and everything. Really, really neat stuff. I really like them. Utah Scientific was showing their routers. Their big thing was 2110 alongside with SDI, and basically, right, they have systems now where you have an SDI router and you have 2110 cards plugged into the same router. So instead of saying, I've got to convert like Turner, where they converted, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of signals of SDI at all 3 locations to 2110, which costs a lot of money. This is a case where you just plug the card in and you're doing 2110 in the same router. Also, they can do, of course, SDI to 2110 conversion in the router right on that card. So it's done in the router. And then of course, they're working with NMOS and all the standards that Luann talked about. And there was an example, one of the multi-viewers and router panels and everything else. So it was really cool. They were sharing a booth with Hitachi. So there's Hitachi showing all their latest cameras. And of course, 4K is the big thing. Clearcom, so Clearcom's interesting. You all know RTS used to be the broadcast standard. Clearcom was the next step down, and then you had Riedel, who of course has risen up alongside with RTS. And so now it's everyone on the trucks, they're all either RTS or Riedel. Anyway, so Clearcom has a wireless system called FreeSpeak, and they have a new one called FreeSpeak Edge. I know some big churches use these. They're really, really nice RF wireless intercoms. What's interesting about the new one is they've gone from 2 gig to 5 gigs, and so it gives them more flexibility there and more range. And also they went with 4 channels now. So you have an A, B, C, D now. Remember, it used to be 2 channels on a belt pack. Well, now you got 4 channels. Also, you can actually control all the volumes at once if you want, instead of trying to do every one individual. So it's a really neat system. So that was kind of cool. Fabrics had all their new products with 2110. You can see the rasterizers are just out of control. They have so much stuff on there. But anyway, so I spent some time talking to them, and they had, whoops, I went too far, but they have their tag handheld. One thing I thought was interesting is, by the way, I don't know if anybody, I was talking to somebody earlier about black reference, but basically, that we're still doing black reference, and it's funny how you get a new Fabrics or a new type of handheld unit, and they don't do black now, right? You can't look it away from anymore. I think Tektronix does on their tablet, which is great. You didn't get rid of that. But anyways, because I don't know if you show up somewhere, you got a reference problem, right? And you can't look at 100/40 anymore like we used to, right? And you still have to. So anyway, so that was interesting. So they're showing their products. Canary actually had a van. I don't have a wide shot of it, but this was a van on the floor in their booth. And they were showing, by the way, if you go to a 12G, if you're doing BNC with coax, AVP, who makes patch panels, They only do a non-normal patch panel, by the way, because it's such a high frequency. They haven't, got it working through with patch cords that way. So anyways, with a normal through, but Canary is. So Canary makes a 12G normal through patch panel. So that's one that right there that he was pointing at. And I thought that was interesting. What was neat is inside, they were actually showing how they take apart and build SMPTE connectors, which, there's not very many people that can do this. It's very expensive. I looked into it because I used to do Triax connectors, and I looked into it, and it's like $30,000 to buy all the gear to do it. You know what I mean, right? So anyway, so they're actually selling kits now. And anyway, so there's a lot to it. But so that was neat. And by the way, I don't know if you guys know this, but Canary makes remember the old Triax testers we used to use on the trucks to test Triax cable? Well, Canary makes a SMPTE fiber tester. And anyway, so they look really nice. I haven't used one that looks really cool. So anyways, that was interesting. So how they're showing all that. TV Logic, their HDR monitors. So I'll jump over that real quick. I don't know if you guys know this. I mentioned this before, but this is a company that makes switcher panels and buttons and all that stuff. And I can't even pronounce the name, but they're really popular. They do really well. And so if you have a Black Magic or you have a really low cost type of switcher that's a computer interface, you can plug this switcher in and have a real panel with buttons and a fader bar, right? So which is really neat because a lot of people don't want to use a computer. If you're doing, music, take the Emmys last night, right, or a big, huge show and everything, right? It's right. Nobody wants to fade to dissolve with a mouse, right, to the music. So it doesn't work. So anyway, layered, it's really high quality LED walls. They were there. One thing I thought was interesting, I started talking about HDR. There's some people doing HDR now, but it, really gets iffy there when you get into, if you use an LED wall inside of a building, like say right here, this was an LED wall, we're gonna be running that LED wall at about 20%, okay? Not even near 100%. So then you get into the question of, in that situation, right, how do you see HDR if you've turned the brightness down that far? You know what I'm saying? So anyway, so you get in the deal kind of, where does it make a difference and does it make sense to have it or not? But if you're of course, if you're running it full bore at 1,000 nits or whatever, nits you can do at 500, right, then obviously you can start seeing stuff like that. But it was interesting talking to them. They make a really high quality, and as you know, they're at 0.9 millimeters on the pitch between the LEDs. It's absolutely incredible. Yeah, did you see the one at the Emmys last night? Oh my gosh, it was huge. Yeah, so they do curved. This was Multidyne. Multidyne has all kind of fiber solutions. So this was a thing where they're doing a PTZ camera over Opticon, and not SMPTE, but Opticon. This was a converter box. And then they have all kind of modules, things like that. They're working with, they also are doing a deal with Tag and their cards that does stuff. Things like that. And then they have modules like this where you put cards and everything. So this was Panasonic. This was interesting. They actually made a switcher that runs off of GPUs. And so that's something that people are talking about. But I thought this was really, wow, this was a flat screen monitor laying down. That's a switcher where you're doing it all with your fingers. So that was interesting to look at. And then there was Adamus had their new monitor called the Neon. So, they make a lot of products, a lot of different recorder monitors. And of course, they do HDR with 1,000 nits and all that. And they just make some really neat stuff. Standard off-the-shelf SSDs you can buy on Amazon now. You just plug in, record, and walk away with a ProRes or Avid show and that kind of stuff. So the really cool products. Sound Devices makes all kind of cool little mixers. This one was also at NAB. The one thing I want to tell you about is that they made, I was telling Rick earlier, they got into the video devices instead of sound devices, and they were making really, really high quality Apple ProRes and Avid recorders. And the really cool thing about their product is, I know a lot of churches at the bottom, is that they do Dante. So you can actually just put in the IP address, bang, you're recording 64 channels of digital audio off your audio board just like that. So anyway, so really cool. And I heard a rumor at NAB that we're not going to make these anymore. I walked in the guy at IBC in the booth and he said, you're right, we stopped. We only have a few left. We're out of the business. So they're no longer going to do video anymore. They're just going to stick just with audio. So that's kind of sad. And they used regular SSDs too. And then you had, see who was that? Oh, this was Plura. So Plura was showing their 2110 solutions, and this was an OLED monitor. By the way, a lot less OLED, by the way, so very little OLED whatsoever at the show. There was rumors Sony's getting out of the business completely, but they still are making the 17-inch monitor that they've been making for shading cameras, things like that. But anyways, this was Plura doing theirs. So I got to tour their booth and seeing all the different things that, of course, waveform vectors, on and on and everything else. And by the way, they also do 20-7 now with different switching and all that stuff. Lynx, we're showing all their yellow brick products, and then their green machine. Same thing from NAB. I still love their quad split, by the way, which is really cool. So that's kind of software defined. It's kind of cool box. Lavo, I spent a good time with this lady talking about 2110 and how they're working with different switch manufacturers. And then, they bought Providius, and so they're doing IP multi-viewing now, right? Because they bought the company Providius from up there in Canada with Tony Zare, used to work for Evertz and everything. And then also, I thought this was interesting. They put these little soccer set there, whatever, to show how they can put different PTZ cameras places and control them and everything. That was interesting. Grass Valley, oh my gosh, I gotta hurry, but Grass Valley had so many products. So one thing I wanna mention to you guys real quick is they're doing an IP road show right now, and they're going to different cities across the country. So I flew out to LA to Burbank to see it, and I spent a day there with them in Marriott Hotel, and it was really impressive, went really great. So they walked me through all end to end, right? All the way from the cameras, all the way to the multi-viewers, all the way to the recording, play out, record, replays, everything, all Grass Valley, all 2110. And so anyways, and now of course, NMOS compliant. So anyway, so you've got your, actually that was 4A, sorry. But anyway, so they're showing all their, of course, the K-frame series frames and K-frame with the Cayenne and all that. And it goes on and on and on. They're doing cool things. And actually, I got a couple more pictures in a minute showing a truck they had on the floor, which is interesting. So this was the 4A switchers, the 6000. So the 4A has gone from a little switcher to now they're making they had 2ME, 3ME, and they're just growing and growing, and very, very powerful switchers. There's a little 6000, 1200, and it goes on and on. Bridge Technologies, they're for monitoring transport streams. And one thing I want to mention is, of course, Rick and Luann know this really well, but they started monitoring 2110 a while back, and so that you see the stickers there, and so they're doing great, and they do really great monitoring for transport streams. And Sencor, and I think Digital Glue is the other company. Nick, Tim Anderson, I think they sell them too in the United States, I believe. But anyways, RTS showing all their new panels. Kind of skip over that. Oh, this was a new broadcast panel for your announcers. So that's kind of cool. I don't know if you guys done sports, everyone uses that same box. It's been around forever, and it's really small, cheap and simple. And this was a new one, so that was kind of neat with RTS. Lighting, this was ARRI had this new light that's really powerful. So it's called the Orbiter. And so this thing has a 60-degree edge open face optics, and it has 6-color light engine. So you understand what that means, right? The problem with the LED is you have one frequency, right? And it kills cameras and it hurts everybody. So a lot of people do red, green, and blue, and some people do white, some people start adding other colors. And so they're doing 6 colors. So that way, their big thing was that they can handle wide color gamut better, because they're a wider range of frequencies.
It's really 6 colors, or is it like red 1, red 2, green 1, green 2?
It's truly 6 colors. I went on the website and read about it today. Anyway, so there's all kind of interesting, like cyan and amber and things like that. Anyways, and then because of that, as you know, you can change the color temperature, right? So this one goes from 2,000 to 20,000 K, which is just incredible. So it's really, really, really cool light. I'm not sure what it costs, but it's really, really powerful. By the way, there's a control panel in the back, and it's removable, so you can take it out and set up your stuff and everything. Tons of presets on it.
Can you go back for a second?
Absolutely.
Like a battery connector, or what is that?
I don't know. I saw that too. I wonder what that was. Yeah, I'm not sure. Or is that the mount you'd have on each side, the way you mount it? Maybe you could see it there. Yeah, it's the mount. Yeah. So anyways, I saw that drone. I think it was huge. I thought it was interesting, so I took a picture of it. And then I saw the tethered on there. Remember, CNN was doing tethered drones. TerraDeck, as you know, got bought by Bitech, and they bought a ton of other companies. And so they have a new focus assist system to go on the cameras. So that was interesting. And it tracks up there, by the way, on this monitor. So you can see as you adjust your focus and everything, your controls on your camera, you can see it on your monitor. So that was pretty neat. And then let's see where my leave off was. That was JVC cameras, JVC doing 2110 and all that stuff. You think what else? Okay, so this was an interesting company. I never heard this before. Basically, this is an HDMI multiviewer, and I've been in cases where some vice president or president, right, wants to see 4 things at once on their screen, and and we used to convert to SDI. You're like, this is expensive doing this the way. Anyway, so it's kind of cool. And so there's the box there, 4 HDMIs in, 4 and 1 out, 4K, and it's 685 euros. For a 4K multi-viewer. By the way, that's with waveform and vectors and audio meters. And then they also had monitors. And then they also have a rack mount, by the way. So there's a tighter shot of it. You can see the waveform on there and your audio meters and everything. I thought, by the way, I love that people right up there with no delay. Really. Anyways, but and then so now they're starting to work with the SFPs and bringing in 2110, and this is their rack mount boxes. So these are modules, and you can have like a 4-way or an 8-way or 16-way or whatever. It's all you just buy modules, plug it in. So it was kind of a neat company. And then now we're back to Grass Valley. Sorry, that was out, but this is Grass Valley products. Of course, they had the SDI to HDMI converters. They showed an NAB and all the other 2110 stuff. And then let me think what else here. Oh, so I want to show this real quick. This is a new concept for shading, and this is a new RCP controller down here at the bottom, and it's really neat. And basically, instead of just having a joystick for iris on your black level, you basically have 2 on top, and then like 2 rings, and then you have another wheel at the bottom, and everything's assignable. So if you want to make one of those gain, you can. You know what I mean? If you want to make one of those color temperature, you can, right? So you don't have to, remember you used to paint red, green, and blue. Well, now you can just shift the frequency. So as the sun is setting, right, the lights are coming up from the stadium is changing, you just shift it. And anyway, so really neat design. I really liked it. I thought it was cool. And then the other thing is using an iPad as your GUI. So basically, whereas on the switchers, you could control things on there, and now you're doing it on an iPad. The iPad can look at multiple RCPs, and so you can just pick which one you want. And whatever you touch, then, of course, you'll see that control in there, and you can adjust it. It was just a really, really neat design. So that's something new that Grass is doing on their cameras. And then there's the Cayenne, of course, the most popular sports switcher in the world. And of course, they do 2110 now. Oh, one thing about them is, by the way, is that they're now supporting XL to import the 2110 IP addresses. So instead of typing them in manually or putting them in some other way, if you create your 2110 addresses in a spreadsheet, you can import the spreadsheet. And so you could say, hey, I want these 15 cameras, I want these, 10 replay devices, whatever it is, and then it'll just dump it in automatically and you're good to go and you're making pictures. So that was interesting, save a lot of time there. And then they had a full-blown NEP truck on the floor, double expando, and it's completely 2110. So that was cool. There was another one at NAB, by the way. So this was NEP, and this one's been on the road for a while now, and so it's fully running, fully up and working. There's the shading area. Not a lot of camera controls, but a lot available. But anyways, you can see all the waveforms, all devices, and then your gear room, and then audio, and then that was the racks behind audio, and also you have all your, of course, typically you have all your intercom with the audio guys in there, and on and on and on. Okay, where am I leave off? A hurry here. Let me see here. This was NewTek. As you know, NewTek got bought by VizRT, so this is their new switch, and they have their new switchers and everything. So they were there, and all the different devices in replay, their 3-play for replay devices and all that stuff. So they were there, and they were, of course, right next to VizRT, and then that's all their frames for all their devices to run their switchers, everything. So that was VTech. That was out of order. Okay, Evertz showing 12G solutions, 4K, so that was routing, multi-viewers. Scorpion has gotten really big. This is their module, right, that plugs into the frame. Started out as fiber, now it does everything, a lot of stuff. Note there's even a Dante card and everything else. So anyway, so they're showing all their Scorpion line with all their cards because they have a big FPGA on there, can do anything. And then, let me see here, software-defined, 2110. I'm trying to think what else I got in here. And of course, their EXE, their big, huge 2110 router. That's huge. And then of course L-band, all the RF switching, all their receivers. They're finally doing 2110 out of the receivers now. So they didn't have that before with their decoders. All right, I'm going to try to hurry up here. Let's see. And this was MediaKind, and so actually didn't get much pictures in this booth, but what I thought was funny so they had, of course, all their encoders, decoders. As you know, they can do 16 encodes in 1RU now, and they can do with HEVC, which is really powerful for REMI, right? That's what NASCAR, so Rick Ball's using with NASCAR, right? And doing all these big events. And so, and also 4K, of course, you can do 4Ks on 1RU and HDR and on and on and on. So anyway, but I thought was interesting is this is a small hall that was out front, used to be Imagine, and they had the whole room to themselves when you walked into the place. And I thought it was funny because on the right was a Dutch lady making waffles. Because this is popular in Amsterdam, if you've ever been there. So anyway, so they literally brought somebody in to make waffles to give away at the show. I thought that was funny. So that was the media kind waffles. Anyways, and then AWS, of course, was there, Amazon on the floor. So many people were connected through them with cloud and everything. And NHK, I had to go back in the new concept, new technology area, Rick, and they had their 8K. I didn't get a shot in the room. Actually, it said no pictures in the room. But anyways, but they had their big 8K monitor and everything, and I got to look at that, look at some content. For a long time, the 8K, yeah, it was 4K, became 8K, yeah. So anyways, but so they had that on a big screen in there. And then I think almost down at the end, and then embryonics, as you know, SFP, really big. As far as a lot of companies depend on them to do their 2110 and everything, conversion, everything. And they were showing multi-viewers, of course. You see the multi-viewers in there. And and then of course, as you know, they come out with a 1RU frame that's up here where you can plug their SFPs in. So instead of going to another company, you can actually just buy their frame. And it had 2 big power supplies in there and lots of fans, Rick. So to try to keep them cool, because that's an issue, is these SFPs overheating, as Luann knows really well.
Oh, no, they've told me they have no problems with that.
In February.
As I'm sitting there pulling it out and waiting to get in the air to cool it down and plug it back in.
So having no problem with getting it hot?
Yeah. The odor embryonic,
And you know, they're doing, they're not just doing 2110 and 2022-6 and 7, but they're also doing, as you know, HDMI and SDI, and you can even get like a cross converter now on an SFP. And so they do a lot of stuff with their SFPs, and like I said, you could plug them in a frame and mix and match and do whatever you want. And these typically are HDBNCs, or I guess there could be some DIN, but the people don't want DIN, they want HDBNCs. And that's the end, so.
On the attempt slide, there was a little AV1 in the bottom. Did that even show up?
That's a really good question. I did not talk to them about that, but I did hear a little, did you hear that, Luann, from anybody? But I heard a little buzz on the floor, but just a few companies. But one of the issues there is, isn't it the resources to do it, right? Steve knows a lot about it. It takes a lot. Oh, really? Okay. Because originally it was like, remember HEVC was 10 times, the processing of AVC, of MPEG-4, and so are you seeing more AV1?
Yeah, they were talking quite a lot about it, like I said, in my video.
Cool. Okay.
Buyer beware. We heard a lot of people saying 2110. There's some fairly good sized companies advertising that haven't been showing up for these tests.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just say, if you want to double check it against the list, probably not a bad thing to do. The same with JPEG XS, because there are only 2 chips out there.
Oh, I did want to mention that. So I had a picture, and what happened to it? So I took a picture in the Intupix booth, and I did want to mention that, you mentioned it, but so for when we did TCO from 12G to 3G, right, 1080, looking like 1080p, but now with JPEG XS, what they were showing is instead of doing a JPEG XS started as a 10:1, kind of ratio as a starter, right? So if you're doing 4K, that 12 gigs ends up becoming 1.2 gigs, right? Well, the only problem is that people want to get it under 1 gig to put it on a 1 gig circuit. So anyway, so what they were showing is they were compressing down a little bit harder to get it in a 1 gig. So they were running 4K at 850 megabits, add in the audio, the uncompressed audio, right? And then that was keeping them below that 1 gig number. And so that was the big thing they were showing, was doing doing 4K at 60, 12G over a 1 gig Ethernet circuit, right?
And Discovery's keeping theirs just under 10 gig.
Bob, let me get your email. You're working in Iceland now?
IS is Iceland.
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny. You're like the third person that's asked me that, so. I can't believe it went to the, remember they'd always happen, it kept shutting off? That's funny. Yeah, we lost the room.
Okay.
Okay, well, thanks. Any other questions? I will post I will convert the Luann of my presentation to PDF tomorrow and put it on the website, on the SMPTE website. I don't know if you guys go there, but just go to SMPTE Atlanta, scroll down, and it'll say past presentations, and you go in there and there's all the presentations that are PDF of the PowerPoint, and then we'll, once the video's done, it takes a good while to render the video. Once the video's done with the audio, then we put that on YouTube, and then I'll put the link on YouTube on the website, okay? So if you want to go back and watch it again, you can. So.
Thank you.
What do you think?
Thank you.
Thanks.
And that's one building out of 15.
Yeah, 15. So, hey, let's seriously, when we do these like this, we have to get money to pay for the food. And so we went out asking vendors. And so I really want to thank MediaKind. Lisa, by the way, Lisa Hobbs had to go off and do another gig for her company, so she couldn't be here tonight. But I want to thank Lisa and George, who's right here with Utah, and Luann with Nevion for buying the food tonight. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it.